My dog Maz was an incredible two-legged rescue dog from Afghanistan. And so for my latest podcast, I'm actually going to dedicate it to him and tell you a bit about his story, because too many people write off disabled dogs and think that they don't have a quality of life. And I am here to tell you that that is just not true. Over the years, I've had some fantastic comments from people. The vast majority have been very supportive, but there's always a very small minority where they're negative. And I really want to set the record straight and help people see that just because a dog is lacking a leg, or in his case two, it doesn't mean that they can't live life to the full. So my name is Dr. Helene. I'm an emergency medicine doctor and also a certified animal aromatherapy specialist. And I love to help people with an integrative approach to their health and that of their pets. I am particularly passionate about disabled dogs and elderly dogs. And if you follow me on social media, you will have seen my story over the last few months of sort of navigating various health challenges that Maz had. I do hope you'll hit the follow and the like button and or subscribe, and please share this podcast as well, because as I said, the more people who realize that disabled dogs can have a very good quality of life, the better it is, because too often they're left to languish in shelters. So Maz hailed from the city Mazar-e-Sharif in northwest Afghanistan. Now, his story probably began really about 2013, as he'd been injured for about 2 years when he was first seen by a visiting vet. We don't really know what happened. He was in the locale of a sort of a vet clinic, and a visiting vet, Dr. Susan Chadima, was running some outreach projects, and she saw this dog with severely damaged legs. So I've actually got a YouTube playlist of Maz. So and I'm adding to it all the time. I've got a lot of videos of him. So if you look in the show notes, I will link it all there. But she saw this dog with these damaged legs, and he acted like her host during the visit, and she couldn't believe how well she was functioning. The vet lab had sort of helped him with a little bit of food and some flea treatments and things like that, and vaccinated him, but they didn't have facilities to do anything else. So he'd been on the streets for about 2 years by this point, and nobody really knows what happened or where he came from. So Dr. Susan called my friend Louise, who was running a shelter in Kabul in Afghanistan, if she could help, and Louise said yes. So she sent a car to pick him up. So there was a 7-hour journey, and Maz's new life officially began on the 15th of October 2014. Now, he was just really popular at the shelter. He didn't let his disability bother him at all. And initially, it was obvious that he was going to have his legs amputated, but what to do? So previously, we'd never kept a two-legged dog alive before, because they've always been injured, and it was generally felt that a two-legged dog wouldn't be able to survive and have a good quality of life. But Maz had obviously survived on the streets for 2 years with these damaged legs. Prosthetics were out of the question. This is something that has been asked of me so many times over the years, but he had no functioning leg to stick a prosthetic to. So it was really important that, we just needed to get rid of the legs so that he would be able to mobilize even easier. He was mobilizing really well, but the legs stuck out in front of him. So Dr. Mo from Mayhew International visited the shelter to amputate his damaged back legs. Now, bearing in mind, in clinics over there, we didn't have access to x-ray machines or anything like that, but it was obvious there was no mobility in the joints, so they were all very fused. The operation was really difficult to get one leg off, as there was so much damage with all the sort of the vessels embedded in the bone, that it took 4 hours to remove one operation, and Maz needed a further surgery to remove the other. And I was speaking to Louise a couple of weeks ago, and she said she'd been just so stressed through the whole surgery because it was just so long and difficult. Years later, when he started suffering with arthritis, I actually had x-rays done, and we found out he actually suffered a broken neck and back. So we have no idea how he survived. I mean, it's truly a miracle. But he obviously, as a homeless dog, he faced a daunting future, but he survived all that. I first became aware of him on the 14th of February 2014 when I saw a video of him. Now, I'd suffered a devastating loss of my dog Treacle from Alabama Rot in December. 2 weeks prior to her death, my best friend of 30 years, Jean, had died. And a few months before that, my dear Daisy cat had been knocked down by a car and killed. So I was really, really depressed, and I had two dogs left. Toffee, who was a German Shepherd cross, and my little pockety rockety Springer Spaniel, Evelyn. And Evelyn was really struggling with her grief, but I was really struggling about the thought of taking on another dog. Anyway, I saw this lovely video of Maz playing with his best friend at the shelter, Whitey. And I just thought, oh my goodness, he's amazing. And I messaged Louise to say, do you think his cat, could he be okay with a cat? Because I had Paddington cat and Holly cat. And she said, well, I'll cat test him. And I said, does anyone else show an interest in him? And she said they didn't have any applications for him at all. And this is often the case with disabled dogs. Inquiries are often absent. So we knew he was going to be okay with cats. So the journey to get him over, and Maz's story filled people's hearts, and it was absolutely incredible, the fundraising. And I remember going to work, and I was working, I'm trying to think where I was working at the time then. I was working where I am now, Manchester Royal Infirmary. So I remember going to work and looking at the total of the donations raised. And I think there was something like £1,000 left. And I just thought, I'm just going to whack it on my credit card and I'm going to worry about it. I'll do I'll do loads of extra shifts and I'll just pay it. And I literally got home from work and checked the totals, and it was full. It was done. And so the cost of getting him over, it was just absolutely amazing, everyone who followed him. So on the 29th of April 2015, Maz left Afghanistan. He stopped over in Dubai, and then he had an onward flight to London. And on the 3rd of May 2015, I met him for the first time. It was just amazing. He was so full of life. He just literally oozed it. I settled him into the passenger seat and we headed for home. And I remember he wasn't really very keen on treats, and I was really surprised about this. And so when we got up to Manchester, I obviously introduced him to the dogs. So it was introducing him to Toffee and Evie. But I'd also adopted in the March a Springer Spaniel called Rowan. So I'd been desperate to get a new companion for Evelyn because she was really grieving the loss of her sister. And so got this, my first boy dog. So Rowan was my first boy dog. And I'd got him in the March. And so Maz met his new brother and they got on like a house on fire. It was absolutely incredible. He and Rowan just bonded and would play together loads. He was absolutely amazing with my cats and my bunny. So the initial bunny he arrived with was Lady Mary Jane. She was the most beautiful lopid / lion head rabbit. Unfortunately, she died a few months later, very suddenly. I'd taken her camping actually. She hadn't been very well, and she died while we were away. But she liked to share a bed with Maz, and it was really cute. He wasn't bothered about her at all. Now, Maz never enjoyed his wheels at the shelter. When he had his legs taken off, Louise had popped him on wheels and he did exercises in them for a couple of hours, building up to a couple of hours a day, but he just didn't bother wanting to move. The other disabled dogs were embracing their wheels, but not Maz. And you can see videos of him in the playlist that I've got on YouTube. Always preferring his two legs, and boy, he could really rack up some speed, and he would run around with Rowan, and I mean honestly, he would give me a run for his money. And if he'd had three legs, he'd never have been allowed off lead. It was only that I could run fast enough to catch him. But he loved all our walks and campervan trips, and I had a stroller for when he got tired. We went over mountains, we went to the beach, the parks, castles, all over. He loved to run down sand dunes. And there was a really memorable trip where I was doing a half marathon with my Springers, and I'd visited Glastonbury Tor, and I was with my good friend Keith, and we went. I was like, look, we've got to get up Glastonbury Tor. So Toffee was on wheels at that time, so Keith helped Toffee with the wheels get up the top of Glastonbury Tor as I lugged this stroller up. And it was just incredible. And then literally both Toffee and Maz ran down afterwards and just had the best time. Maz loved the sounds of the city and city strolls as well. And he loved being in the camper van as well. And he just enjoyed wherever we went. But I used to love taking him on little walks around the city. And he was like, if you think about John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever, he'd be sat in his stroller looking at everyone. And when there was the bee trail in Manchester, it was all these bee statues. We went around doing the trail, and he just absolutely had such a blast, and he met so many people and he loved all the attention. We went away on a lot of trips because I competing canicross. And one time I was doing a race and at the Checkington Challenge, and my dear friend David was giving out the medals, David and Jan. And Maz ran up behind me after I got the medal. And I said, well, you better give Maz the medal then. And it became a tradition whenever we went to this particular venue that Maz was going to collect a medal. And I used to get so stressed at these competitions because I thought, God, if I don't get a podium place, Maz is going to be really disappointed. And it became quite a tradition, and it was much to the delight of everyone. And but fortunately, I always got a podium place. So we always got a medal. Otherwise, I'd have had to, do a dummy medal, I think. But his story delighted people. He's appeared in magazines, and post-lockdown, he appeared on BBC Northwest as well. And I spoke about my work as an emergency medicine doctor during the pandemic and the comfort and resilience he inspired in me, because I didn't have any family up in Manchester, and it was a really difficult time. And living alone, my dogs literally were my family. And, how can you feel sad when you've got a dog with two legs just showing so much joy? Obviously, as age went on, arthritic changes robbed Maz of his ability to walk, which was very sad. I'd had stem cell treatment. He was struggling with his mobility, but I had stem cell treatment as Evelyn had it, and it had done very well for her. Now, unfortunately, with stem cell treatment, there is a small minority, very small percentage where it can actually not help them. And this was the case with Maz. He had to go on some medication. I had him very well managed on all my essential oils that I used. But because of the risk of them interfering with the stem cell implants, he had to go on medication. And I struggled. To get his pain under control. He just became quite weak because he was struggling with his walking. And it was a really, really sad time. And this was just over a year ago, and I thought I was probably going to have him put to sleep in March 2024. But I ended up stopping all the medication and just going all in with all the different essential oils I could figure, because these meds were just making him drowsy. He just wasn't able to do anything. And slowly he started to be able to weight bear again, and he'd be able to, I got him in a sling, and he started to be able to walk in a sling. So I was like, oh, I wonder if you'll accept wheels. So I had lots of chats with walking pets in the States, and he got a quad, and it helped him have a little bit of mobility, albeit reduced, but he was trying. We'd do a few meters in the garden after snuffle mats, and we were actually going away on the North Coast 500, a coastal road trip in Scotland just after he got the wheels. And so every single venue we went to, we would do some practice on his wheels, and he was just determined to move and live. And we went all around, and I made some changes around the house to make it easier for him. So he always had a bed next to mine, but I actually swapped it, and he was tucked in next to me at night, and I put his bed downstairs by the sofa, which he'd always chosen a bed near where Toffee was. And when Toffee passed away, I'd just sort of left the bed there because he always liked to lay in there. And I should actually mention in this story really as well, because after Toffee passed away, I wanted in December 24th, 2017, I wanted to get another disabled dog in honor of her. So Bambi arrived in the June, which was actually on the day that would have been her 15th birthday. And then a few months later, Inca, my blind dog, came. She was an extra. I thought I'd foster her, and as is the case with disabled dogs, nobody wanted to take her on. So I'd always been a bit reticent about putting the bed next to a sofa just in case Inca trod on him. And obviously he was quite delicate. And what was absolutely incredible was Inca never trod on Maz at all. And she became his absolute protector. And if he started to cry or anything and I was upstairs, she would howl to let me know. She was very, very gentle with him. It was absolutely incredible. And Bambi, over the years, Bambi and Maz were together. Bambi was very close with Maz. He'd curl in the bed with Maz and go in the stroller. And there's lots of cute videos. So we come to this year, and Maz was probably about 14 years old by now, and I've had him, 10 years. And he faced his toughest battle. We'd been out for a beautiful walk, and the sun was shining, and I'd settled him down, and I took Rowan and Inca out for a walk. And they didn't want to walk, and we'd only been out about 10 minutes, and I came home and Maz was a bit agitated, and I put all his oils on trying to settle him down, and then he just wasn't settling. And I thought, oh, do you want to go out for a wee? So I took him out for a wee to empty his bladder, and he just sprayed urine everywhere, which in itself wasn't unusual for Maz, but I was like, what the hell's going on with your tummy? And I could see his tummy expanding before my eyes, and looking at his gums, they're really pale. And I recognized the signs of bloat. Now, bloat is a very, very serious condition. It's an emergency. You've got to be really careful if you've got a deep-chested breed. Again, this is why you shouldn't exercise your dogs within 2 hours after eating, or after exercise, don't let them drink copious amounts of water, stagger it. He didn't really have any risk factors for bloat at all, apart from the fact that he was elderly. But, it was literally he'd eaten 5 hours before. Anyway, I got into the vets. From when it started, he must have been in the vets within 30 minutes. And I'd called them on the way. I was in the vets within it's a 5-minute journey from my house. Just said, I'm bringing a dog in with bloat. And they were literally, Ashley Vets, Chorlton, Manchester, they were incredible. They were ready for me. They took him off me, and the vet came out to speak to me and said, you're right, it is bloat. And I said, well, he said, what do you want to do? Because he's an elderly dog. Do you want to put him to sleep, or do you want to go through the surgery? And I said, I spoke to my vet, who wasn't on that shift. But I'd rung him at home, and he said, no, go and look at Maz, you'll know. So I looked at Maz, and he was doped up on drugs under the x-ray machine, but he looked very bright. And I thought, no, we're going for the surgery. And I stayed with him while he was intubated, so that if he died, I knew that he'd seen me, I was with him. And it was a very tense 2 hours, sat literally at home by the phone. And I had so much support from all his wonderful followers, but he survived it. He survived bloat. So he came home that night. Oh, no, sorry, he didn't. He came home in the morning. I went to visit him that night for a few hours, and then was very, had a few hours sleep, because obviously I was anxious. And he came home, and he enjoyed 3 more campervan trips, 2 to the beach. So 1 to our favourite place in Suffolk, and then Pembury Country Park. And then we did another Canicross trip as well. And he was soaking up the sun and enjoying himself. And we were actually making really, really good progress. And I'd literally just gone to bed after my shift in A&E. It was 4 a.m. in the morning. And he started to cry and scream, and I was like, what the hell's going on? And his gums were pale. So I was literally in the vets again within 5 minutes. The team on at 4 a.m. at Ashley Vets were amazing. They were faced with a real bad challenge, a dog going into shock, gastric dilatation again, asked me if I wanted to have him put to sleep, and I said, if we can reverse it, let's reverse it, because, if he's determined to live, I'll help him. And everything we had a challenge with, he just rallied, and we decompressed his stomach, and then he went into cardiac arrest, and he came round from that. It was absolutely, his will to live was extraordinary. The whole time through this, I'm like, do I just say stop, have him put to sleep? But he kept rallying, and his incredible veterinary team were just amazing, and they worked so tirelessly. And then he came round from his cardiac arrest, had low blood pressure, and, he just kept fighting it, and he kept recovering. He was home later. So 14 hours later, he was home. I had a mini intensive care set up at home with fluids, and he was having syringed food. And then he started to eat from the bowl the next evening, just small amounts, but I was really hopeful. And I went to bed with hope. And unfortunately, just 4 hours later, he started to deteriorate, and I had to race him to the vets and drive through the morning traffic as my lovely vets weren't open that evening. And I knew it would be his last trip, but he died in my arms on the 14th of May, 2025. And it was just a horrible journey home for the others to say goodbye. It was a very sad moment, and the others were very sad. But you know what? Those last days at home, there was so much worry over the last few months, really. But we had such a wonderful bond, and he fought so hard, and it was just incredible, his will to live. But obviously, his little body had endured so much. but he was just such an incredible dog, from the Afghanistan streets to campervan adventures and running and life on a sofa. Um, he really did live a full life, a testament to courage, resilience, and love. And his will always inspire me to find the joy and all the lives he touched as well. I've had the most wonderful messages from people who followed his journey from the beginning or were, followed him through over the years. They met me or they came across him on social media. And I just would say to you, please just embrace every precious moment. And I would ask you all to look beyond limitations. These dogs are only limited by our imagination. And I've always been passionate about showing that they can live a very rich and fulfilling life and will continue to do so. Um, if you can believe it, you can achieve it. So I hope that's told you a bit about my incredible boy, Maz. Please do hit the follow button and share the podcast because I would love more people to learn about what these fabulous dogs are capable of. And as I said, I will post some video links in the show notes so that you can, and I do hope you look at him because my words can't possibly tell you how wonderful it was to watch him run down sand dunes. And he would go up them as well. He'd walk up them, and I'd lug the stroller to the top of a sand dune first, and I'd go back and get him, and he'd be walking up the sand dunes, and then he'd just belt down the other side. He loved it, and I can't do justice to it. You have to see the videos. So I do hope you will. And you know what? If you're looking for a companion, a disabled dog can really bring you so much joy. They might not be able to do canicross with you, but they can go for walks with you. They can give you companionship. And I honestly guarantee you will not be short of adventures with them either. Thanks for listening and take care. Stay safe. Stay well.